you may have noticed something that's been building over time in the gaming industry. This is the growth of a concept, an idea, a mind virus of sorts. This is the idea that there are only two types of games in the world. The blockbusters marketed towards the lowest common denominator, think like Call of Duty or Watch Dogs, games with huge marketing budgets, advertised alongside snack products to appeal to the widest possible market. And on the other side, the only other kind of game in this false dichotomy is the games for people with sophisticated tastes. The indies, the art games. In this false narrative, you only fall in either the big budget dude bro game fan camp or the starving artist camp. There is no middle ground. This is not a new narrative, it's one that's been pushed for quite a long time. I mean, it was even a cover story back in 2003. So why has this suddenly come to a head? Why is this such a big problem for gamers like you and me who just want to play good vidya and screw all these labels? What is it that finally caused the dam to break and allowed reality to come pouring through? Well, you're about to find out now, aren't you? So, a new, somewhat insidious form of this lie has been crafted. It stems from certain cliques inside the indie scene, and the press that covers the indie scene. It starts with the false notion that almost every video game ever is just horrible trash, meant exclusively for straight white males who want to swear and shoot big guns and cum themselves over big-breasted bimbos. Or, in the words of the then editor-at-large at GamaSutra, obtuse shit-slingers, wailing hyperconsumers, and childish internet arguers. However, this couldn't be farther from the truth. A quick look at the recommended games wiki that 4chan's V-board creates shows that the world of vidya has many different types of games to suit anyone's taste. There are games where you play as a commander of a grand army of medieval soldiers, games where you play as a lone spacecraft fighting against ships several times larger than itself, and games where you play as just a humble item shop clerk, and everything in between as well. This whole notion seems to be one that you'd normally find coming from someone's grandmother, whose only knowledge of games comes from the commercials on television. So why is an enthusiast press pushing ideas that seem born out of ignorance? I mean, then they go on to say things like, things are changing, that there's a revolution upon us, a sort of an indie revolution.
Large companies, they're just putting out the same games.
Car racing, fighting, shooting.
There's a kind of tiredness to that experience.
Working in independent games right now, it feels like there's infinite potential in any direction.
I mean, now you can make your own games without having to deal with horrible evil publishing houses. This is, of course, ignoring that people have been selling self-published games since the mid-90s. But hey, if you spend years of your life toiling away at a game that's personal to who you are, then you can become an indie millionaire, just like Phil Fish. And who doesn't want to be Mr. Mutton Chops? Of course, you kinda have to actually know how to make video games first. I mean, granted, software like Unity and Twine may require little to no coding skill, but there are plenty of other aspects to game design. But for the low, low price of $495 a year, you can learn to become a successful indie dev too, just like Mike Bithell, the creator of Volume. What a deal, right? This is all a crock of horseshit, though. The only reason why most of these games sold at all was because they were hyped up as the next big thing. What they won't tell you now, though, is that the indie hype machine is basically broken. 2 incidents in the indie gaming community have pretty much destroyed it beyond repair. The first was what happened with the creator of one of the most overhyped indie games of all time. I mean, how many games do you know that have almost an entire movie devoted to the story of their creation? One of the men behind the creation of this overhyped game, which is named Fez, was a guy called Phil Fish. He was propped up like he was some kind of indie rock star. But unfortunately, he ended up being quite the prima donna instead. I mean, from telling a Japanese developer to his face that his country's games just suck, to stating on Twitter that gamers are the worst fucking people, to telling people to choke on his dick, he was already making a reputation for himself before his game was even released. But what really caused things to blow up was after the release of Fez, when Phil Fish had a massive meltdown on Twitter. This guy, Marcus Beer, aka Annoyed Gamer on Twitter, called Phil Fish a fucking hipster and a tosspot in a video hosted on Game Trailers after Phil Fish refused to answer some questions that asked his opinion about the indie scene on the Xbox One.
You were the guys who did Indie Games the movie, and some of you looked relatively normal in it, One of you looked like a total tosspot in it.
Phil Fish couldn't handle being called a tosspot or a fucking hipster.
Hey fuckface, the thing with us tosspots, hipsters, is that we're not beholden to media leeches like you. And you're right, we're very successful, and we're not going anywhere. Get used to it, you a middle-aged parasite. Compare your life to mine and then kill yourself. Today's beef is brought to you by some inconsequential fuck. It must be frustrating being such a small commentator, only being able to ejaculate vomit out of your mouth from the sidelines, unable to create beauty or add to the world in a meaningful way. You sit in judgment, masturbating on top of your little soapbox, trying to make others feel small so you can fool yourself into thinking you matter. Jim Sterling does what you do better, and with infinitely more class and personality. He has a personality. I demand a public apology. I want you to apologize on camera. I fucking hate this industry. I'm done. Fast 2 is cancelled. Goodbye. To be clear, I'm not cancelling FastTube because some boorish fuck said something stupid. I'm doing it to get out of games. And I'm getting out of games because I choose not to put up with this abuse anymore. One final tweet to tell you that I'm trending worldwide right now. So long, suckers.
And that was that. The sequel to Fez was cancelled. And Phil Fish, the indie rock star, the chosen one, he came crashing down in the most dramatic way possible. But that wasn't the only dramatic incident to happen in the indie scene. I mean, nowhere close. The other big incident that helped kill the indie hype machine was one humorously dubbed Burgers and Fries, due to the rumor that it involved around 5 guys. During this event, it was revealed that many of the game developers in the indie community had gotten positive press coverage from people who they were in personal or even financial relationships with. The gaming press did next to nothing to dispel these allegations of nepotism, and instead decided to double down and smear anyone who cared about these issues as being horrible misogynists. Because of these two events, much of the gaming community has lost any desire whatsoever to support most indie games. And who can really blame them? I mean, a lot of trust was lost in the gaming press, and so the only way to find new games is to look through the new releases section on Steam. Besides, why would anyone pay money for these indie games when you could get something with about the same level of quality for free off of GameJolt? Though that kinda does lead into another part of the indie revolution narrative. See, it's a lot harder to sell people on the idea that anyone can be a game dev when Steam only accepts good games onto their platform. So there was a lot of whining and complaining from devs that Steam didn't appreciate their art, and more whining from bloggers because their friends weren't getting accepted. So Valve finally caved and pretty much opened the floodgates to every piece of shit game, even ones that pale in comparison with games made by actual teenagers. This growing pile of shovelware titles only helped to dilute consumer confidence in their products further. Because of these events, the indie revolution is effectively over. Now, if you want to have a successful product, you actually have to work hard and make something that people actually want to pay for, and then spend time and money actually marketing your game. I mean, sure, there are still some games made by small teams that have managed to gain a large audience, but none of them lately have actually been a part of the indie clique. GamaSutra is acting like all of this is fine and dandy, because they certainly wouldn't want anyone to get nervous and maybe cancel their GDC subscriptions. So what routes are left open to you if you still want to make a career out of making hipster trash games, but you don't want to rely on the open market to pay you? Well, the first one is pretty mundane by comparison to the second. I mean, they've already been calling their games art, so why not go for public and private art grants? This is the route that studios like Tales of Tales have taken in the past, and they'll probably keep going this route in the future, as their largest indie game to date, Sunset, was a total flop on the open market. So that's one route the indie clique can go to make you buy their games without you deciding to buy their games. There's another direction that these devs can take, one with much more interesting implications. GamaSutra itself has reported on this before. Basically, if you want to get grants for games, another way you can do this is to sell your games as an educational technology. This is the direction that well-known indie click developer Brianna wants to take her studio, Giant Spacekat.
This is not a liberal fantasy. This is a greedy money-making fantasy.
Of course, their ideas of what makes an educational game aren't limited to just teaching children subjects like math or physics. What about games that can change your behavior as well, reinforcing positive behaviors and discouraging negative ones? But don't take our word for it. Jennifer Jenson, professor of pedagogy and technology in the Faculty of Education and director of the Institute for Research on Learning Technologies at York University, Canada, is all in favor of this idea.
One of the great things about digital games is that they can actually support players to change their behaviors. And the way that they do this is through a series of reward structures and through the game's rules systems. This is through a kind of gamification model that we've had in education for a very long time.
It's not a new idea either. BJ Fogg, director of the Persuasive Tech Lab at Stanford University, came up with the word Captology, computers as persuasive technologies, all the way back in 1996.
I've got 3 words for you, and here they are. Simplicity changes behavior.
BJ Fogg and his Persuasive Tech Lab think big. With the aid of Captology, the dream of world peace can be promoted in just 30 years. Now that's impressive power. I mean, who would have thought your video games could influence such widespread social change in such a short period of time? Wait, widespread social change, combined with video games, combined with, well, these guys. Are you starting to see the problem here? Do you want them to be the ones teaching the next generation? Do you want the world to change to reflect their views on social issues?
Hi, I'm Mia, and this is my pal Desi. Welcome to my lab, where I love to build things. I have an idea. We're going to make a machine that makes cupcakes. Cupcakes are a sometimes food. But Mom and Dad said it was okay, and the fun isn't in the eating, it's in the building. Will you help Desi and me today?
One of the things that we talk about often in talking about game design is this idea that play is practice. The developmental psychologists have been championing this for years. So one of the things that's really interesting is how we can change people's perspective on race or on gender through play, especially if they're playing different perspectives or if they're practicing playing different roles.
Around me is a burgeoning empire of steel. From my throne room, lines of power careen into the skies of Earth. My whims will become lightning bolts that devastate the minds of humanity. Out of the chaos, they will run and whimper, praying for me to end their tedious anarchy. I am drunk with this vision. You hacker, a pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors.
If you are not scared by now, nothing can scare you.